The morning my son told me to stay home, I had already ironed my blouse. It was the green one, sage green, with small pearl buttons down the front. I bought it 2 summers ago at Macy's on clearance because my daughter-in-law had once said offhandedly that green wasn't really my color. I bought it anyway. Small rebellions are all you have sometimes. I'd been looking forward to that weekend for 6 weeks. 6 weeks! I'd marked it on the calendar on my refrigerator, the paper one from the hardware store, the kind with the little pictures of covered bridges. Nathan's family reunion, Lake Tahoe. I'd even written it in red pen, which I never do. My name is Winifred. Most people call me Freddie. Have since I was 9 years old and announced at the dinner table that Winifred was a name for a woman who collected ceramic owls and never left the house. My mother laughed so hard she spilled her iced tea. I've been Freddie ever since I am 63 years old. I taught elementary school for 31 years, 2nd grade, mostly the age when children still think you hung the moon. I retired 4 years ago when my knees started arguing with the linoleum floors. I live alone in the house my husband Walter and I bought in 1987 in Reno, Nevada. 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a rose garden I've mostly kept alive, and a kitchen that still smells like the cinnamon rolls I made every Sunday morning for 22 years of marriage. Walter died 8 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I used to tell people it was merciful, how fast it went, because that's what you're supposed to say. The truth is, I would have taken 11 years of slow if it meant 11 more years of him sitting across from me at breakfast, reading the sports section, even though he never watched sports, just because he liked the ritual of it. Our son Nathan was 29 when his father died. He handled it the way young men often do, by staying busy, by solving things, by flying home for the funeral and then flying back to his life in Sacramento 3 days later. I didn't blame him. Grief is private and everyone finds their own door out of it. His door was work. He got a promotion 6 months after Walter died, then another one the year after that. He met his wife Claudine at a conference in San Francisco. She wore a red blazer and knew everything about commercial real estate and had opinions about wine that she shared whether or not you asked. Nathan was dazzled. I could see it the first time he brought her home, the way he watched her talk, like he was watching a movie he couldn't believe he'd been given a ticket to. I tried. I want to be clear about that. I tried with Claudine. I asked about her work. I learned the difference between a cap rate and a cash-on-cash return because she mentioned once that people who didn't understand real estate basics were difficult to have conversations with. I drove to Sacramento for birthdays, for Thanksgivings, for a housewarming party where I knew no one, and stood by the shrimp cocktail for an hour and a half smiling at people who looked through me like I was a window. I tried. But there's a particular kind of dismissal that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't yell. It just quietly rearranges things until you are no longer in the center of the picture. Claudine did this slowly, over years, the way water reshapes stone. A seating arrangement at Christmas where I was at the far end of the table. A group text for planning Nathan's 40th birthday that I wasn't added to until 2 days before the party when they needed someone to pick up the cake. Phone calls that got shorter. Invitations that came later and later until sometimes they didn't come at all. And I found out about things afterward, in passing. The way you hear about a neighbor's vacation when they mention their tan. Nathan let it happen. That's the part that still catches me sometimes, late at night when I'm not expecting it. He let it happen. I know he loves me. I've never doubted that, not really. But love without backbone is a soft thing, and soft things don't hold their shape under pressure. The Lake Tahoe trip was Nathan's idea originally. A long weekend at a resort for his 10-year work anniversary, something he'd been talking about for months. He mentioned it to me in November, said he wanted me to come, said it would be good for all of us to spend real time together. I counted the weeks. I arranged for my neighbor Bet to water my roses. I bought that blouse. He called on a Thursday evening 2 weeks before the trip. I was making soup. Butternut squash? From scratch, the way Walter liked it. I still make it even though it's just me now. Because some things you hold on to, not because they're practical, but because letting go of them feels like losing something else. The call started normally. He asked how I was. I told him about the book I was reading, a memoir by a woman who'd hiked the Pacific Crest Trail at 61. He said that sounded interesting in the way people say things when they're working up to something else. Then he said, "Mom, I need to talk to you about Tahoe." I turned the burner down. "Claudine and I have been talking," he said, "and we feel like this trip should really just be the three of us, me, Claudine, and Marcus. Marcus is their son, my grandson. He was 7 at the time, with Walter's same cowlick at the crown of his head and a laugh that fills a room the way good music does. It's a family thing. We want it to be intimate." I didn't say anything for a moment. "You understand, right?" he said. "It's not personal. We just want it to be, our unit. Our unit." I thought about the 31 years I gave to other people's children. I thought about the nights I sat with Nathan through ear infections and bad dreams and the specific misery of being 12 years old and having no friends. I thought about how I used to press my hand to his forehead to check for fever and how I still sometimes do that motion without thinking, reaching toward nothing. "I understand," I said. "Because what else do you say to your son when he tells you that you are not part of his family?" I finished making the soup. I ate it alone at the kitchen table. I did not cry, which surprised me. I think I was past a certain kind of crying by then. When you've been slowly moved out of the frame long enough, you stop being shocked by it. You just feel tired. I rinsed the bowl. I went to bed. I lay in the dark for a long time listening to the house. The next morning, I started doing what I always do when I don't know what else to do. I cleaned. I went through the hall closet, which had needed organizing for 2 years. I pulled everything out. Old coats, boxes of Nathan's childhood things I'd never been able to give away. A set of luggage we bought for a trip to Italy that Walter and I had always planned and never taken. And behind the luggage, pushed back against the wall, was a box I didn't recognize at first. It was medium-sized cardboard, sealed with packing tape that had gone brittle and yellow with age. Walter's handwriting on the side, in black marker, "Freddie, important. Please open." I sat down on the hallway floor. I don't know how long it had been back there. Moving in and out of that closet for 8 years without seeing it, or maybe seeing it and not registering it, the way your eyes skip over things that have been in the same place too long. I pressed my fingers against the cardboard. It was solid, ordinary. The kind of box reams of paper come in. I almost didn't open it that day. Something about it frightened me. Not in a dark way, but in the way that things connected to Walter still sometimes ambush me. Opening that box meant hearing from him again, and I wasn't sure I was ready. But I opened it. Inside was a manila envelope, thick with papers, and on top of the envelope was a letter in Walter's handwriting. 3 pages, both sides, written in the careful block print he used when he wanted something to be legible. He had terrible cursive and he knew it. I read it standing up in the hallway, still in my bathrobe, and by the 2nd page, I had to sit down again. Here is what I learned in that hallway on a Friday morning in October. Walter, before I met him, had been part of a real estate investment partnership with 2 men he'd known since college, a man named Arthur and a man named George. In the late 1980s, the 3 of them had purchased a property together in northern Nevada, a small resort on the eastern shore of Lake Tahoe called Clearwater Ridge. It was struggling when they bought it, an old conference center with a dozen cabins and a lodge that needed work. Arthur and George handled the operations. Walter provided a portion of the capital and held a 1/3 ownership stake. Over the years, Walter lost touch with the details of it. He'd sign things when asked, received occasional small disbursements that went into an account I didn't know about, and largely let Arthur and George run it. By the time we got married, he said he'd forgotten about it half the time. It seemed like a relic of his younger years, something that would probably fold eventually. He meant to tell me. He kept meaning to. He wrote that in the letter. I kept meaning to tell you, and then time passed, and it became one of those things you put off, until putting it off is its own kind of habit. Arthur died in 2019. George, in a phone call Walter had apparently received 2 months before his own diagnosis, had told Walter that the resort had been sold to a hospitality group, a company called Meridian Resorts, in a deal that valued the property at significantly more than any of them had anticipated. Walter's share, after taxes and fees, was held in a trust. He'd had a lawyer draw up the paperwork to transfer it to me. All of it was in the envelope. Instructions for what to do, who to contact, phone numbers that may or may not still work after 8 years. The last line of the letter said, "You always said I wasn't good at telling you things when they mattered. You were right. I'm sorry. Use this to go somewhere beautiful." I sat on the hallway floor for a very long time. I called the number for the attorney listed in the papers, a firm in Reno that I half expected to have closed by now. They hadn't. The woman who answered knew the name Walter Ashby immediately. She said she'd been wondering when I would call. She was not unkind about it. There were 2 things she told me that morning that I keep coming back to. The first was the amount. I won't put an exact number here because money does strange things to stories, makes people focus on the wrong parts. But it was substantial. More than I had ever had. More than I had ever thought about having. The second thing she told me was about Meridian Resorts and specifically the property they'd acquired. Clearwater Ridge, now renovated and rebranded as the Clearwater at Tahoe, a 4-season luxury resort with a spa, a lakeside restaurant, and a conference center that hosted corporate retreats and weddings and private events. As part of the acquisition agreement, which Walter's attorney had negotiated before he died, the trust retained a fractional ownership interest and a named stake in the property. His name, Walter Ashby, was listed in the founding documents, and since the trust had transferred to me, my name, Winifred Ashby, was now on those documents too. I set the phone down for a moment. I looked at the roses through the kitchen window. Then I picked the phone back up and asked her how soon I could get the paperwork finalized. It took 3 days. During those 3 days, I did not tell Nathan. I thought about it. Of course I thought about it. He's my son. My instinct, the one I've had since the day he was born, is to call him first with everything. Good news, bad news, the particular small joy of a good book or a cardinal at the bird feeder. He's the first person I want to tell things to. That doesn't go away just because someone has hurt you. But I sat with it. I let the 3 days pass. And on the evening of the 3rd day, when everything was confirmed and signed and the attorney had sent me the final documents, I opened my laptop and looked up the Clearwater at Tahoe. It was beautiful. Stone and timber, big windows facing the lake, a terrace that jutted out over the water. The kind of place that knows what it is and doesn't apologize for it. And there, in the events calendar on the website for the coming weekend, a private booking, a corporate family event. I looked at the name on the booking. I booked a room for myself. I called Bet and asked her to watch my roses after all. She said of course, and asked if I was going somewhere fun. I told her I was going to Lake Tahoe. She said that sounded wonderful. I said yes. I thought it probably would be. I drove up on a Friday afternoon, 5.5 hours from Reno through the Carson Range, the kind of drive that does something good to your thinking. All that space, all that sky. I had the radio on, an oldie station out of Carson City, and when Unchained Melody came on somewhere past Minden, I sang along to the whole thing, alone in my car, and cried a little, the good kind. The resort was everything the pictures promised. The woman at the front desk welcomed me by name. "Mrs. Ashby, we're so glad to have you," with a warmth that was more than scripted. Someone from the management team had been notified apparently. The attorney had made calls. I was shown to a room on the second floor with a balcony that looked directly out at the lake. The water, that particular shade of blue-green that doesn't look real until you're standing in front of it. I unpacked my things. I hung the sage green blouse in the closet. I went down to the terrace for dinner. I ordered the salmon, which was exceptional, and a glass of white wine, which I nursed for an hour while I watched the sun go down over the water. An older couple at the next table smiled at me. I smiled back. I felt, for the first time in a long time, like myself. The following morning, I came down for breakfast and walked through the main lodge, which was already buzzing with the energy of whatever private event was being set up. Staff moved through the corridors with purpose. I found a quiet corner of the dining room and ordered coffee and eggs. I had been sitting there for about 20 minutes when I heard his voice. Nathan has a particular way of talking in professional settings. A little louder than necessary, a little more confident than his natural register, like he's always slightly performing. I recognized it before I recognized the words. Then I heard Claudine, sharper and more precise, directing someone about where the welcome bag should go. And then I heard Marcus, a 7-year-old's laugh, sudden and pure, ricocheting off the stone walls. I didn't move. They came around the corner of the dining room. Nathan with his phone already in his hand, Claudine in the cream blazer, Marcus running slightly ahead, the way children always do. Nathan was saying something about the conference room setup. He wasn't looking at the dining room. He didn't see me. Marcus saw me first. "Grandma Freddie," he said it the way children say things, no calculation, no hesitation, just the fact of happiness straight from the source. He ran toward me and I caught him and held him and pressed my nose into the top of his head, the way I have since he was an infant. Nathan stopped walking. I looked up at him over Marcus's shoulder. The expression on his face was not what I expected. I had thought there might be irritation or confusion or the particular careful neutrality he uses when he doesn't want to show what he's feeling. Instead, he looked, for just a moment, like a child himself. Like a boy who has done something he already regrets. Claudine's expression was something else entirely. "Freddie," Nathan said. "What? How are you?" "Good morning," I said. I set Marcus down but kept his hand. "What are you doing here?" Claudine asked. Her voice was pleasant in that careful way that is not really pleasant. "I'm staying here," I said. "But how did you even?" Nathan started and then stopped. The resort manager appeared then, a composed man in his 40s named Patrick, and he came to my table specifically. He had the manner of someone who does his job well and takes quiet pride in doing it well. "Mrs. Ashby," he said, "I just wanted to personally welcome you this morning and let you know that anything you need this weekend, please don't hesitate. The team is fully at your disposal." He smiled. "It's a privilege to have you here." Nathan looked at Patrick. Then he looked at me. Then back at Patrick. "I'm sorry," Claudine said in the voice she uses when she is not sorry but wants to sound like she is. "Did you say Mrs. Ashby?" "Yes," Patrick said with the easy confidence of someone who does not understand why the question is being asked. "Winifred Ashby, co-owner of record through the Ashby Family Trust." He looked briefly confused by their confusion. "She's been on the property documents since the original acquisition." The dining room was not entirely quiet. There were other guests, a murmur of conversation, the clink of coffee cups, but in the small radius around our table, things went very still. Marcus, who understood none of this, was examining a mini bottle of maple syrup. Nathan sat down. He didn't ask if he could, he just sat down, the way people do when their legs have made a decision without them. "Dad?" he said, and then nothing else for a moment, just the word. Just Dad, like he was placing something down carefully on a table. I looked at my son. This person I have known longer than I have known anything. This face I know better than my own. The cowlick he passed to his son. The way his ears turn red when he's ashamed. His ears were red. "You didn't know," he said. It wasn't a question. I found the box 3 days ago, I said. He closed his eyes. I want to tell you that I felt triumphant, that the moment Patrick said my name out loud, something in me unclenched and rose. And there was something like that, I won't pretend otherwise. There is a particular, complicated satisfaction in being seen, really seen, by the people who decided not to see you. But the larger thing I felt was grief. Not new grief, not the sharp kind. The old, seasoned kind that you carry so long you stop noticing it until something bumps it and it spills. I grieved the years of small diminishments. The dinners at the end of the table. The group texts I wasn't on. The trip I had ironed my blouse for. I grieved them not because I was angry. I was, a little, still am. But because you don't get those years back. You don't unmove to the edge of the frame. You just decide, at some point, to step out of the frame entirely and take your own picture. Claudine had gone very quiet. She was standing slightly apart, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. I don't say that with satisfaction. Uncertainty is not comfortable to witness in anyone. Nathan looked at me for a long time. "Mom?" he said. "I'm sorry." 2 words. Just 2 words, and they cost him something. I could see that. He's not a man who apologizes easily. He gets that from Walter, who was the same way, who used to say that apologies felt like laying down a card you couldn't pick back up. I'd always thought that was a limitation. In that moment, I thought maybe it's also what makes the apology mean something when it finally comes. "I know," I said. Marcus looked up from his maple syrup. "Are you staying for the whole weekend, Grandma Freddie?" I looked at my grandson with his grandfather's cowlick and his room-filling laugh. "Yes," I said. "I am." We had breakfast together, the 4 of us. It was not easy, and it was not seamless, and there were silences that sat heavily for a moment before someone moved past them. Nathan kept looking at me like he was recalibrating something. Claudine was quieter than I had ever seen her, which was its own kind of answer about who she is when the power dynamics shift. Marcus ate an enormous amount of bacon and told me about a book he was reading about volcanoes, and I listened to every word. After breakfast, Nathan asked if we could talk. We walked out onto the terrace, the 2 of us, and stood at the railing looking out at the lake. It was a cold morning, bright and clear. The kind of October day in the Sierra Nevada that looks like a painting. He talked for a long time about how things had shifted over the years, slowly, without him fully noticing until the shift was complete. About how he told himself he was keeping the peace, that he was managing a difficult dynamic, that I was strong and would be fine. About how telling yourself something often enough starts to feel like it must be true. I listened. I let him finish. Then I told him that I understood some of it, that I knew marriage was complicated, that I knew the pull of wanting peace in your own home. But I also told him that I was his mother and that I had earned, simply by being his mother, something more than the edge of the frame. That Marcus deserved to know his grandmother, not as a name that came up occasionally, but as a person. That I was 63 years old and I had no idea how much time I had left, and I was done spending it shrinking. He didn't say anything for a while after that. He stood at the railing and looked at the lake. Then he reached over and squeezed my hand once, the way he used to when he was small and wanted to tell me something without saying it out loud. I squeezed back. We stayed at the resort through Sunday. I had breakfast with Marcus both mornings. He taught me something about the types of volcanoes, shield, composite, cinder cone, and was genuinely offended when I couldn't immediately identify which type was most common in Hawaii. I told him I would study before I saw him next time. He told me to bring flashcards. On Sunday afternoon, before I left, Patrick gave me a brief tour of the property and went through the trust documentation with me and the property's legal team. It was more than I'd had time to absorb, numbers and structures and arrangements that would take months to fully understand. But the basics were simple. Walter had put something aside for me, quietly, without making it a story. and it had been waiting in that hallway closet all along. I drove home alone on Sunday evening, back down through the Carson Range as the sun dropped behind the ridge. The radio played something I didn't recognize and I didn't change it. I watched the sky go pink and then purple and then that deep particular blue that comes just before the dark, and I thought about Walter. About the things we don't say until we say them in letters. About the things we carry in cardboard boxes in hallway closets. About the way love sometimes shows up years late and asks you to just accept it without making a fuss. I accepted it. When I got home, Bet had left a note on the door. "Roses looking beautiful. You were right about the pruning." I stood on the porch and read it twice and smiled. I went inside. I made soup. I sat at the kitchen table and ate it and looked at the paper calendar on the refrigerator, the one with the covered bridges. And I turned the page to November and I wrote nothing in the squares. Not yet. Those squares are open. I'm filling them slowly with things I choose. That was 8 months ago. Nathan and I talk more now. It's not the same as it was before everything that happened, but that's all right. Some things don't go back to what they were, and maybe they shouldn't. You go forward instead. He came to Reno for Thanksgiving, just him and Marcus. Claudine visited her own family, which honestly suited everyone. Marcus and I made pie from scratch, and he was deeply skeptical of the whole process until the pie came out of the oven, and then he declared himself a natural. I've been learning, slowly, what it means to have money after a lifetime of not having much. I'm not reckless with it, and I'm not changing who I am. I gave some to the elementary school I taught at for 31 years. Specifically to the second grade classroom fund, which always needed things. I've booked that Italy trip, the one Walter and I always meant to take. I'm going in the spring, alone, with a very good travel agent and a new pair of walking shoes and a journal I've already started writing in. I still have the sage green blouse. I've worn it twice since Lake Tahoe, both times to dinner with friends, both times because I felt like it. It turns out it's a fine color for me after all. Some mornings I still reach for the phone to call Walter. The instinct hasn't gone anywhere after 8 years, and I don't expect it to. I've stopped being surprised by it. I just let it pass through, the way a quiet song passes through a room, and I carry the day forward. I'm writing a new chapter. It took me 63 years and a cardboard box in a hallway closet to get here. But I am here. And I find, to my genuine surprise, that the view from here is quite good. I've thought a lot about what actually happened at that resort. Not the dramatic part, not the moment Patrick said my name out loud while Nathan stood there with his ears turning red. I mean what happened underneath all of it. The slow machinery of it, the years of small choices that built toward that morning on the terrace. Here's what I've come to believe, the things we do quietly, without an audience, without anyone watching. Those are the things that eventually define us. Walter never told me about that property. He didn't make it a grand gesture. He just took care of it steadily, without fanfare, and when he was gone, it was still there. That's not luck. That's character expressing itself across time. And Nathan, I've had to be honest with myself about my son. He's not a bad man. He loves his son. He works hard. But somewhere along the way, he made a series of small choices, each one easy to justify in the moment, each one almost invisible on its own, that added up to something he wouldn't have recognized as himself if he'd seen it all at once. That's how drift works. You don't decide to become someone who dismisses their mother. You just keep choosing the easier thing, the quieter path, the one that avoids the harder conversation until one day you're standing in a resort dining room realizing you've been doing it for years. I'm not angry at him anymore. That surprised me, honestly. I thought I would be angrier. But anger takes a particular kind of energy I'd rather spend on other things now. And besides, I watched his face in that dining room. I watched him sit down without being invited and say his father's name like he was setting something fragile on a table. That cost him something real. I could see it. And the willingness to pay that cost, to sit in the discomfort of it rather than walk away and make excuses, that matters. That's where people either grow or they don't. What I want to say? To anyone who's been sitting at the edge of their own story, waiting for permission to walk back toward the center, you don't get that permission from anyone else. I didn't get it from Nathan. I didn't get it from Claudine finally going quiet. I got it from a cardboard box in a hallway closet and the handwriting of a man who loved me imperfectly and completely and wanted me to go somewhere beautiful. The intelligence I needed wasn't the kind that shows up on tests. It was the slower kind, knowing when to hold something, when to let it pass through you, when to stop shrinking to fit a space that was never the right size anyway. That takes time to learn. I'm 63 and I'm still learning it. And the courage I needed wasn't dramatic either. It wasn't confrontation. It was just the quiet decision to book the room, to drive 5.5 hours alone through the Sierra Nevada and sing along to the radio and let myself be somebody who belongs somewhere beautiful. That's the whole thing, really. You belong somewhere beautiful. That's the whole thing, really. You always did. Sometimes it just takes a cardboard box and 8 years and a Friday morning in October to remember it.